All right. So, hi, everyone. Welcome to Contacting Professionals, Networking to Discover Your Career Path. We are uh, so excited to be here to kick off Humanities Fest 2022 with we are from Career Services. And for us, when we hear contact, networking, I think is the first thing that we think about. So, hi, I'm Rebecca Harrington, and I'm a career specialist in the Career Services Department. And I'll let my co-host introduce himself.
And I'm Pierre Michaels, another career specialist here in the Career Services Center. We're here to support students, alumni, community members, go through a whole process of identifying, discovering career paths, which we're going to be talking about, and then using tools, resumes, cover letters, all that stuff to contact them. So we're going to talk about a little bit of those aspects as we go through here, but really focusing heavy on that networking to discover your career path, as the name implies. So
All right. And why don't we go ahead to our question here just to get started. We don't like to sit and to talk in silence in a vacuum. So if you want to share with us throughout the presentation, please do. But curious what your um, reason for attending is. So, are you someone looking to prepare for a network conversation? Maybe want to learn more about discovering career options? Just really interested in the Humanities Fest and all the things that are a part of it. There's actually going to be a Humanities panel conversation on March 2nd, and this is going to be a perfect way to get ready for that. Or maybe it was an assignment for you to attend a Humanities Fest event, or some other reason, which you can pick multiple of these. If you pick other, give us some detail. But anything you want to share in the chat, we'd love to hear.
and this is good information for us to have and for you to be thinking about, because as we go through this conversation, you're going to see that there's different motives and there's different ways to be interpreting this information based off of where you're at right now. So to enter that into the chat, if you're here with us right now, or just to think about this as
Mhm.
you're absorbing this information, can help influence where you're going to be applying it first.
Yeah, thinking of your goal when it comes to networking and having networking conversations is essential. We want to approach any conversation having some idea in our mind, right, where we would like that conversation to hopefully go. All right, so we have an E and a B. So, okay, this is an assignment, but they are wanting to learn more about career options, which is awesome.
I'm glad that we could support that interest as you use this for the assignment. So,
Yeah, and then interested in all things Humanities Fest, so that's a great. And I think we're going to be talking a little bit more generally about networking, but we will bring up some examples and to think about how networking can be, I think, very helpful when it comes to the humanities. There's a lot of ways to think about working in the humanities, whether it's that you're studying something in the humanities and you want to work with that, or maybe you're studying something else but you'd like to work in a humanities environment, or you study humanities but you go work in a non-humanities environment, but you take those values and those ideas and that creativity with you. There's so much to think about when it comes to careers in humanities, and I think networking is a valuable way to learn about all the different ways you can use humanities in your career options.
and so Rebecca, we've used the word networking a lot. Can you just
Oh my
talk about or
gosh.
define what that means?
Absolutely. So, yeah, networking is the process with connecting with people. And I think it gets kind of a corporate speak thing in our mind when we think about it, reputation, but really it's something that we do all the time. But I think networking is when we make it maybe a little bit more purposeful, right? So networking is um, when you're talking to someone, to make a point of connecting with them. If it's somebody that, again, it should be a mutual relationship with that person, something where you're learning something from each other. You can potentially maybe help each other out, even if it's not right now, it might be in the future. But it's that idea of, hey, we're all connected. We can all share helpful information with each other, and kind of, not just meeting somebody and going on your merry way, but actually maybe making that connection. And then today we're going to be talking about something a little bit more. It's about something called cold networking, which is actually reaching out to somebody that you don't know with the purpose of building that connection with them so that you can hopefully have that mutually beneficial relationship with them. And that's a scary process. So we're hoping to give you some really concrete tools so that you can do that. Because it's one thing to meet somebody, when they come to present to your class, or you're at a function. But when it comes to just out of the blue reaching out to somebody, it can be a little intimidating. But we're here to say that it's totally possible and actually very beneficial. And then another definition or just things we wanted to talk about is, when you're going through this idea of discovering your path, because that's the other part of the title of this session, there's a lot that goes into that. There are assessments you can do to help you better understand yourself, right? And what might fit for what you want to do. There's web searches. Obviously, we can look at job postings, we can look at career databases that are out there. So there's a lot of information. But I think one of the more helpful things that people don't often think about is learning from people in different fields, having those conversations so that you can learn about the fields that you're interested in. I think we can learn a lot from the internet. We can learn a lot from research, but actually having a conversation with somebody that works in a museum to learn what that's like and what kind of job opportunities might be there that we haven't even heard about. Those career databases and those assessments have kind of like the really common careers, but there's so many careers that we've never even heard of. So having those conversations is going to open you up to maybe ideas that you haven't thought about before. It's also a way to maybe get an opportunity to have an internship, or to, get an experience in different fields, which I think is, again, making a commitment to trying a career path. If you can test it out with an internship or some sort of job shadow experience first, that's always a great thing. And so doing that networking and talking to other people is a great way to get those experiences, which is an important part of discovering your career path. So, networking, making those connections, and doing some of that work to figure out what is it that you might want to do, what questions do you have. So, a lot of that is kind of where we're going with today's presentation. So, we kind of put it into well, I should say three phases. Then we kind of added a little bonus fourth one on there. So phase one is that research and prepare. So we're going to dive into all of these throughout our presentation today. But phase one is research and prepare. So understanding kind of what are your options, what are you thinking about when it comes to your career, and getting ready to have those conversations. So actually, do you have a resume? Do you have a LinkedIn profile? Like making sure that you have all the things that when you reach out to somebody to network, that they're going to want to see. And again, better understanding ourselves and what we're curious about, having that goal in mind is going to be important. Phase two is actually the step of actually reaching out to somebody. So that's making a list of who you want to contact, figuring out how you're going to present yourself when you contact them. We're going to be giving you a lot of tools for that, a lot of tools, even some fillable forms to fill, lots of templates, a lot of things. And then phase three is actually engaging in a successful meeting. So when you go in to that meeting, being prepared for it, knowing what you're going to do, having a plan for how it's going to hopefully go. And then that follow up, of course, is following up, right? I mean, networking isn't just about having one good meeting with somebody, it's about having building that professional relationship with them. So, again, we're going to go through all of these phases in a little bit more detail and give you some resources for them. But that's kind of the process, right? So, understanding ourselves, understanding what we need to learn, finding people that can hopefully help give us that information, having a successful meeting with them, and then following up. That's the goal when it comes to networking. And I
Yeah.
just talked a lot here, so add in what you got.
Yeah, so one thing I just want to emphasize from this idea of networking, and as we're making these contacts, Rebecca mentioned it, so to emphasize it, it's really this process of helping one another. So we'll be reaching out to someone with our own purpose in mind, but we want to remember to really establish that connection. And we'll get into this from that follow-up perspective. It's not just what can I get from this relationship? How can I be a support to these people that I'm making contact with? So even though as we go through this process, we're right now starting off to discover our path, really trying to build that relationship as you move forward. And to help establish that, we need to do our research and prepare and start thinking about our options and what we want to learn and how we want to be moving forward. And this is a great place to start off as you build that self-awareness, as you think about, as I go through this process, what do I want to be gaining from it, from those personal perspectives? And there's a lot of resources out there. Rebecca was hitting on this earlier. This is like the small part or a very large part of discovering your path, but it's a small part of this presentation, right? This is just things that you want to be doing to help you prepare. So of course, doing a web search, and there's so many different things to be searching on the web, but use that because it's information at your fingertips. But then to dive a little bit deeper, there's a great resource that we have available here at College of DuPage called Career Coach, where you can go to Career Coach. You can be researching different careers by looking at these job titles that are out there, seeing what are those expectations, the pay, the growth rate, actually finding job postings. Career Coach is that great database that has all this information for you to get that baseline information. And then LinkedIn is another great tool that you could be using to dive deeper into that. So now you want to be researching specific companies or people within the field, using LinkedIn to do that investigation without making contact yet, but establishing what you are looking for. And then you can start preparing what you would want to share with these professionals, because it's not just going to be reaching out to them, which we'll be getting deeper into, but then how can you present yourself to them throughout that process? Your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your digital portfolio or physical portfolio, depending on how you'll have those opportunities to be networking, and your elevator pitch, which we'll dive deeper into because that's going to be the most relevant here as we're looking to make contact. But wanting to do this early research to identify those things you want to learn. And here we break it down into two components. If you don't know what you want to be doing, those electronic resources that we were bringing up are a great starting point. Being able to get some of that baseline information to learn more about the fields, to identify if they're growing or declining. Career Coach, as I was talking about earlier, has that local data for the Chicagoland area, about 100 miles or so around the College of DuPage campus, as we like to say. But there's other resources that can give you that on a national perspective or even global, depending on where you're wanting to look to go. The education level that would be needed, those skill sets. So you could find a lot of that information online, and that's something that you should be doing to get started. But what we're going to focus in on is maybe you already have a goal in mind and you want a little bit more of that information, and you're set to start making this contact. You're set to start networking with professionals so then you can find out more details about that job. The things that you can read about online are very helpful, but you want more information. You need more information to help you go through this process. And those conversations that we'll be talking about is what's going to help really lead you to going down this path and discovering, is this something I want to do, or is this something that isn't right for you? So learning more about those specialties, as Rebecca said, when you're looking at these databases, they're very general because they're supposed to represent all jobs that are out there. So they're grouping a lot of similar jobs together. But then to get in conversation about specialties within that, or the industries and the different avenues to be applying yourself, just because you're studying accounting doesn't mean that you have to be in a traditional accounting field. Maybe it is in a more humanities, nonprofit field where you're applying those accounting skills. Or maybe because you're studying humanities, it doesn't mean that you have to be down pigeonholed into this certain path. It could really open up to so many other possibilities. And to have these conversations is a great way to discover that, and then to just understand more about the field and industry as a whole can also help you identify, is this something that I would really want to be going down? But you have to first identify, what are you interested in learning about? What are you interested in taking away from these conversations to help you prepare as you move forward?
And as Pierre mentioned, we talked about the other part of this phase one is getting yourself ready to have these conversations, making sure that you have your resume, for example, and you have your LinkedIn, which, by the way, career services, we offer workshops on these. So you could definitely check out our website and get our schedule for those, or you can come meet with us and we can help you with all that. But we thought maybe the thing to focus on today, from all of those things, is the elevator pitch, because when we meet somebody maybe in a networking situation where you have the opportunity to meet somebody in person, or or even in a Zoom environment potentially, you also will need your elevator pitch when you actually maybe get a meeting and you meet that person for the first time. So the elevator pitch is a quick introduction to you, right? Quick, 30-45 seconds, right? We don't want to just talk for 2 minutes, right? This is super quick. It is something that we want to motivate the listener to want to engage in more conversation with us. So it's a chance to, again, give them the quick pitch, right? So that hopefully they'll want to have more of a detailed conversation. So a couple things that you can include, should include. Number one, of course, is who you are. That one's certainly important, right? So name, maybe where you go to school, what your job is, right? Depends on the situation and where you are in life. But that certainly, is something that makes you credible, right? Like why they should talk to you. What makes you unique? Emphasize your brand. So here's the thing, unique always sounds, I know, to me it always sounds scary, right? Like, oh my gosh, there's nothing unique about me. Like I don't have anything special, right? But that's not true, right? We are all unique because of the connections of all of our experiences. So maybe yes, there's other people that have done one thing that you've done, but they haven't done all of the things that you've done, right? So giving this your, and not just what you've done, it's the skills you have, right? All of that together. So again, what is it that stands out, right? What is it that makes you excited? What is it that's going to hopefully help make them excited? What's your goal? So maybe thinking about, again, are you looking to get more information about a certain topic, or are you just looking to make connections, to have more connections in the industry, and connect with the listener. So if you know who you're talking to, which we don't always, but if we do, make sure that you connect to them in some way, something that you know about them or know about their company or their industry, and then identify next steps. So what would you like to have happen? Again, it depends on the social situation, right? So be sure to pay attention. Maybe we don't need all of these things right away. Some of these things might come later in the conversation. But for example, it might be my name is Rebecca Harrington, and I'm a student at College of DuPage. I am a presidential scholar, and I am a musician, right? Or I play this instrument, whatever it is, right? Or I am, studying history, um, but I have a strong um, communications background, right? Some What are your connections, right? What are the things about you that you want to stand out with that you want someone to know? And then I'm excited to meet people, to learn more about using my musical background in a the world of finance. I don't know, like whatever connection is, whoever you want to connect it. And then, of course, if you know the person, right, you can tailor it to them. So it's that idea of practicing your pitch, which I should have done a little bit more to. I decided to branch off today instead of doing my normal one. But honestly, plan it out. Practice with your pets. They love to hear it over and over again. They'll listen to you, they don't care. But the idea is you want it to sound comfortable when you're talking to somebody, and again, it's not verbatim, right? It's just having that kind of general idea so that when you meet somebody, you can just go for it.
And so you can find more information on the elevator pitch and all those other resources that we have to offer by going into Blackboard. We, as Career Services, have an organization there, the Career Services for Students, where you can find a lot of tools to help you with your elevator pitch, resume, interviewing. So please feel free to go in there, check that out. But now that we've kind of laid that foundation, let's move on to phase two. And now we're going to start reaching out. We're going to start identifying these professionals and not quite make contact yet, but we're going to build off of what we've been doing here and start tailoring what we want to know. As Rebecca was just talking about with that elevator pitch, one of those tips is to research who you're contacting, who you're going to be communicating with, and personalizing that. So first, identifying those different people that you can be making contact with. So friends and family, right? That's a really easy one that people tend to overlook. You want to be networking with anyone that's available to you, but also those connections of connections. So maybe your mom knows someone that works at this place. Well, there's now that introduction that you have. So being able to let those friends and family know that you're looking for other people to talk to can be really helpful. If you're a student here at College of DuPage, those educators, those professionals that you are engaging with in the classroom or that they know can be really helpful. So make sure that you're talking to your faculty, making sure that you're talking to those people that you have easy access to, because again, we tend to overlook them and we think of networking as doing this outreach to people that we don't know yet. But that's actually what we're going to focus in on, is these cold connections, these people that you really don't have the easy in on, but how can you be networking with them? And doing that research that we were just talking about will still be helpful. It's still available to you in this digital age, but you want to be preparing how you will be introducing yourself, and you want to be thinking of these different ways that you may do it. So on LinkedIn is that very popular professional social media site that you want to make sure you're active on, that you want to make sure your profile is built up to present yourself in a way and that you know how to reach out and network and connect. As Rebecca said, our office does webinars. We actually have a LinkedIn webinar later this week, but that's also on a cycle. So make sure you check that out. As a great tool for you. But then also making these connections at live events. These live events can be those in-person traditional networking, but in this day and age that we're living in, where technology is just so accessible, it can be a virtual meeting. It can be participating in a virtual panel and those presenters and being able to reach out to them either in that moment or taking that information to follow up afterwards. Want to make sure that you have this professional communication through email, or as you're reaching out through a phone call, you're preparing what you want to say. You don't want to just do it on a whim. You want to be thinking about how you would be going about that process. So to make that contact, you want to begin with the end in mind. This goes back to what I was saying earlier, as far as doing that research and kind of knowing those things that you want to learn from, and what is the goal of this contact? Why are you reaching out to them? Being able to identify that early on can shape how you will tailorize your elevator pitch, how you will um, tailor that message that you will be sending. And then once you identify, okay, this is why I'm looking for people, you can start identifying organizations that you would be interested in, or organizations that would have these people available. So then you can start targeting them. Using LinkedIn is a great way to use this method, or move down this path of starting to break down these cold contacts that you want to be reaching out to. And then you want to start identifying very specific people. So these can be people within those organizations. This could be people outside of those organizations, but you realize that they're in these desired fields, or they represent these interests that you're pursuing. So you start very general of, this is what I'm looking for. Where can I find that? And then here are the people that I want to be reaching out to. And you're going to start off with a small targeted group, and kind of go through this process as you progress down this path.
Yep. So I put some links in the chat, and we're going to go into those a little bit more as we go. But I want to acknowledge a source for a lot of this information that we have coming up with the actual process of reaching out to professionals, which is Launch Your Career and the Launch Your Career Workbook by Sean O'Keefe. It's the I can't emphasize enough how amazing they are, and if you're really interested in this process, I would buy them, uh, or like, I'm going to see if we have them in our library, because I just found these, and they're really helpful to have. But when it comes to that organization list, that targeted professional list, it's be open, right? Be creative with your searches. I just wanted to mention, and this is something that is on there as a tip, which is when you're looking for organizations, Google is helpful, right? The web is helpful. So top 10 Fortune 500 companies with writing positions. You might be eh, interested to see what you can find with that. Or I did one too, best nonprofits in Chicago for artists. Now, I could be an artist that's looking for a place I can do my art, or maybe I'm someone that I'm in finance or accounting, and I'm just really interested in learning about I'd like to work for a nonprofit. Like, that's kind of my goal, right? Or I am someone that is interested. Oh, it's up a little bit, Pierre. If it's under organization, there you go. That's just the tips part. Or maybe again, I'm in accounting, but hey, I like art. I like artists. I'd like to work for a company like that. So just being creative with your searches to find these different professionals, and then making a list of these. It's just that simple, right? Keep yourself organized though, because it's going to start to get overwhelming. And so I also put a link on there that we don't need to, they're just blank tables, but they're just there to help you. And then once you have your list, right? Again, there's more tips on here on how to find people. But then let's go to that phase two, right? So, and that's on that slide that we were just looking at. So this is from that book. It is super precise, but they have done a lot of research. I mean, I've modified it a little bit more for us and kind of how where we're at this point, but um, it really it works. It seems like a lot, but it really there are numbers behind it to prove how well this works for cold networking. Again, if it's warm networking, right, this is somebody that your parent knows, or that you met in person. Obviously it's going to be a little bit different, but this is okay. I found these people, I've identified these companies, these professionals I want to talk to. So it's actually a 10-day process, and you can see there we have everything from day one is there's an email that we're going to send, and we'll have a template for you for that. Day 3, you're going to send another email. Day 5, you're going to actually pick up the phone and call. I hate phone calls. I am not a phone caller, but we need to do it, right? If you haven't heard back, right, at any of these points, obviously, if you hear back, you're done, right? You don't need to keep going with this process. I mean, you're going to go forward with another step, but if you haven't heard back from the emails, you know what? There are a lot of professionals that if you actually call, they are very impressed by that, and so they will respond. Day 7, sending an actual LinkedIn direct message. Just again, another way, some people aren't very up to date with their email. So maybe the LinkedIn is something that they will see. And then kind of the last thing is day 9. We actually recommend printing and mailing a letter with your resume. And part of that is just because no one does that anymore, right? And so it just might get to them, and they might actually read it, in a way that they didn't an email. And then at that point, but if you're not up for that, or you don't have a printer or whatever it is, there is another email that you can send at that point. But then that's it, right? We will stop bothering them at that point if you haven't heard back, and then it's time to move on to another set of people that you can reach out to. So there's some tips on here of how to email, and then again, we don't have to go through each and every one, but there are actually templates in here of what you can say. Now, obviously, if you are not a student, this will be different. So you'll have to change up a little bit that introduction part, and there's just a lot here, that you can kind of customize, right, depending on your research. So we're gonna um, talk about that a little bit more going forward when you're actually meeting with them. But even before you send these emails, we need to do a little bit of research. Who are they? Where do they work? Is there something about their career that stood out to you? Again, LinkedIn is a great place to find that information, but it could also be on their company website as well. So again, we're not going to read through all of the templates, but they are there. You're welcome to use them, customize them, and hopefully find them helpful.
And Rebecca, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
part of this and this schedule of communication, why it's designed this way is some employers like to see that persistence. They
Yes.
want to make sure if they're going to take the time to talk with someone, that this is someone that's not just doing a random outreach and see who bites. But if you continue with this, then they're more likely to say, okay, this person is serious about a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think because, if you get that first email, it might just seem like, oh, they probably sent this to 100 people. Someone else will write them back. Or I don't, whatever. I don't have time for that. But if you keep persisting, and the other thing which I didn't go into, that the books, if you take a look at them, but just even kind of using your own common sense, be respectful when you're writing back. So you might get a response that says, I'm sorry, I don't have time. In that case, thank you for responding. I will check back with you in a month, or in the future, and hopefully the timing will work out. Or if they ask for you not to contact them, be respectful of that, of course. But I think yeah, like knowing that you're following up and making it personal, a little bit, that a little bit about them, showing your interest. I will say, if you are a student, that is the golden ticket. you know Everyone wants to talk to students. A lot of times people will think students think they have to hide the fact that they're a student when they're networking, but that is the opposite of what you should do, because as a student, you are of no threat to anyone. Like, no, you're not necessarily looking for anything other than information, or maybe an internship, right? Like, so the idea is, people like to help students, right? They like to help people that are just starting out, and they want to talk about themselves and their story, right? So if they have the time and the ability to do it, they will. And that's where alumni, CUD has a lot of alumni. And so and I always say, if you imagine yourself in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and some COD student sent you a message, you'd be, if you had the time, you'd be excited to talk to them and help them. So if you're a student, it's a great time to do it. But even if you're not a student, if you're finished with your program, you're out there working, I think some of these can still be a helpful tool to reach out for networking.
Yeah. And as you're going through this networking, reaching out process, we talked about the persistence, but another thing that I want you to keep in mind is what's the worst that can happen after you send the message? They say no and they don't respond. Well,
Right.
that's not that bad, right?
Right.
So,
Exactly.
so it could be intimidating, but being willing to put yourself out there is that first step. So going through all this process to research and be aware of what you want to be communicating is going to certainly help increase those chances of engagement. And then being prepared with this and identifying those people that you want to really talk to. And then if they respond, great. If not, okay,
Oh, it's
right?
okay.
It may be the biggest fear out there, but it's okay if they don't respond.
Yeah. And most likely the reason is just that they don't have the time. It's not
Mhm.
because they're upset that you asked. It's just something they don't have time for at the moment. As long as you're respectful, I think that making sure that you do reread the email before you send it, make sure that everything is, names are spelled correctly, and that you are professional in the way that you write, then I think you don't have much to worry about, as far as being embarrassed about it, right? This is what we do, right? This is how we all help each other move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. What I would think should be a bigger fear is you've reached out, you made your contact, and now they say, yeah, let's meet. Because now, like, things are on the line, right? You're going to actually have that conversation and you want to be set to really present yourself. And even though I say that should be a bigger fear, it shouldn't be a fear, right? I don't want you to just be totally relaxed as you go into this opportunity to engage with them, because you do want to take it seriously. I say this a lot for when you're going into an interview, but as you enter what this would be, that informational interview, that opportunity where you're talking with someone to gain that information. If you're nervous, that means you care about the conversation. It means that you care about the outcome. So to be nervous as you enter these conversations is perfectly acceptable. It's preferred, right? But it's being able to control those nerves. And that's going to happen by being prepared for the conversation, being prepared as you enter this stage. So that's phase 3, right? Getting set to engage and actually going through that engagement process. So starting off in that early stage of where are we going to be communicating? How are we going to be communicating? Before is a lot more common of, okay, I'm going to go to a coffee shop and we're going to meet, or I'm going to their office. Now there's a lot of other factors, right? It could be virtual. And then that throws in all the technology, right? But
Though it is exciting because now we can meet with people all over the
mhm,
country, or wherever. We don't necessarily have to just stick to people that we can meet in a coffee shop. So it is exciting, but
mhm.
yes, it is a little scary.
Yeah, right. So there's no limits to who you could be talking to, but you have to be set to put yourself out there. Other things to pay attention to as you're preparing for these conversations is how you're going to present yourself. Dressing up is always going to set a professional tone, even if it's not for an interview or it's not necessarily for a field where you have to be in a suit and tie. Maybe you don't wear a suit and tie to the setting. You pay attention to what you're getting yourself into, but you do want to dress up. Right. Going back to that old saying of, you don't dress for the job you're interviewing for, you dress for the job that you want, or their
Mhm.
boss's job, right? You do prepare yourself, and then you want to make sure that you have those notes, those things that we have talked about earlier, those things that you want to be learning, different questions that we'll be diving into. That chart that Rebecca was talking about, we didn't pull it up, but that's in the chat, that link, being able to use that resource to track some information, but then also being set to practice and just prepare how you want to be communicating. And a great tool that you have available to you is Big Interview. This is, as the name implies, meant more so for interviewing, but you can record yourself here, either responding to a specific interview question or just recording yourself present ideas that you want to be sharing, and then go back and watch your recording and assess yourself and identify, okay, this is something that I'm not doing well, or in this virtual setting, I'm doing this. And then if you're doing it virtually, you may be doing it in person. So building that awareness on how to better tweak your presentation to better engage and better present yourself as you move forward. So that's all the preparing for that actual engagement, but then also plan for that interaction. So you want to make sure that you are doing more research on that professional, on that company. You're identifying specific things that you want to be asking. You're taking that elevator pitch that Rebecca was talking about earlier, and now you're personalizing it to this setting, right? You may have a generic elevator pitch as your starting point, but you always want to be tailoring it to the listener, as Rebecca was saying, as one of those core tips. So now you personalize that elevator pitch and you think about, how can I tie this into the goals of this conversation? You ask questions and you take notes. It's okay to write down notes during a meeting. That means the information is being shared that you don't want to forget. You just don't want to take away the note taking as, okay, this is what I'm doing, and you're no longer engaging with them. You want to learn about new resources and new people that they have to recommend. You want to be able to take in this information to help you advance moving forward. And then you want to be identifying that follow-up opportunities. We're going to be talking about successful follow-up and using these connections moving forward. But to learn ideas on how to follow up and how to better engage with them will make that stage a lot easier. And then you also want to think about, how are you going to end the meeting? You want to think about, where will this be going? So it's, the follow-up is learning within that meeting how you can engage further out, but also making sure that you have a good conclusion, a good ending to that meeting planned or prepared. And maybe you'll be able to use it, maybe not, but you want to have something in mind for the purpose of that meeting. So being able to ask some of those questions, or being able to develop those questions, right? So questions that you want to be looking at even before you get into that meeting. Again, a lot of this is about preparing for the actual engagement. So being able to research that professional, going onto LinkedIn and identifying some information about them, or find that company's website. And if they have a company profile page or employee profile page, being able to take in that information about how long they've worked there, or what schools they went to, what they studied. So you have this information. You may want to ask about it, but now you can ask about it from a standpoint of, I see that you went to this school and you study this. Can you tell me about that experience? Which is going to be a lot more engaging for that professional than if you just say, what's your education? Right? Being able to tailor those questions will be so valuable. But then to also understand that organization that they represent, and how they work there and what that company is standing for. So maybe the professional isn't quite in that position that you want, but they work at the organization that you want to be working for. So making sure that you're asking questions about those customers, about their mission statement, just that organization as a whole. And again, that research that you can do will make it a lot more meaningful. So if you can say, I see that the mission statement says this, how does that play out in your work? And you're showing that research early on to help you stand out, and they're seeing you as that professional. Rebecca, just want to check in, see if you have anything to add on these questions before the meeting.
Yeah, just again, you don't want to ask anything you could have just Googled, right?
hmm
We all don't let me Google that for you, right? Like, no. So if it's something that you can easily find, you should find it. And then, as Pierre said, the questions are going to then be a bit deeper and more meaningful. And this is in the handouts as well. And page 5, there's a whole list of even more of these questions that you should be answering before you go into the meeting.
So as we said, this was all prep before the meeting. So now that you're in that meeting, you want to have this conversation. You want to be engaging with them. And that's something to always remember about an interview. An interview shouldn't be one-sided where one person's asking questions, another person's responding. You really want it to be a back and forth. You want to be engaging throughout that process. That's true for an interview for a job, but also for these informational interviews, or why we refer to them as these career conversations, because you want to be having a full conversation about the career, about their path, about that organization. So making sure that you have questions or some kind of icebreaker to get everything moving forward, being able to identify specifics based off of that research that we were just doing about their career path, right? Not just saying, how did you get here? But being able to tailor a very specific question based off of what you were looking at before, or about their job, especially if they're in that field that you want to be doing. You want to ask them about the job. You want to see how this job at their current organization compares to the previous organization they were at. So being able to make those very specific questions, or about the organization, being able to just engage with them from these different perspectives is the value of the conversation, right? It's not things that you can just look up online. This is now what a person is actually saying about it to help us identify, is this a path I want to go down? And then, as I was saying earlier, making sure that you have that strong conclusion, that you're wrapping it up. You want to be identifying some questions, or some comments that you could be sharing as you get to the end of this conversation, the end of this meeting. As
Yeah.
Rebecca said, there's a whole list of questions on that handout. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say to help you out. Yeah, because this is where we don't necessarily want to directly ask for a job, right? But we could ask a question about, what are the best ways to find an internship or a job in this field? Or, what does your organization look for in an internship candidate? And then that kind of opens up the conversation. And hopefully again, as Pierre said, it is a conversation and they're also asking you questions throughout this as well. So that's why that big interview, which I put the link on how to get access to big interview in there, is really important to because you do need to be able to talk about yourself and hopefully sell yourself through this process as well. And I was just going to say too, this works even if you've met somebody even in a live situation. You still want to hopefully get to this point where you can have a better one-on-one conversation with them. It's nice to meet somebody somewhere, but however you've met them, whether it's through a cold email or somebody that or you met them somewhere, this is the conversation you want to get to, because this is the formation of hopefully an actual connection, an actual person that you can talk to, which then leads us to our last our kind of wrapping up part, which is networking is an ongoing process, right? Like, it is nice to meet them and to have this good conversation, but the idea is to kind of keep that going, right? Because they may not have an internship available for you at that time, or that may not be appropriate, or you might even realize, what, this is not the career for me, like, or this is not the industry I want to work in. But you never know where that person's going in their career and where you are going in your career, and if there's ever a time when you might be able to help them or they might be able to help you. So we want to have that ongoing conversation with them. And again, this is all there are suggestions for all of this, more tips on the handout, but follow up within 24 hours of that initial meeting. In fact, the recommendation is to do it the next morning, because there's something about sending an email in the morning that looks very professional, and it kind of helps people start their day with that in mind. So thank them, request them as a connection on LinkedIn if you haven't already. And the thing about being on LinkedIn with somebody is then it becomes much easier to do this staying connected in the future, because when you're connected with somebody on a professional social media like LinkedIn, it will let you know if they get a promotion potentially. It will let you know if they post an article and you can comment on it, or share something with them. It becomes a little bit easier to kind of keep that ongoing conversation with them. Now, we don't want to be stalkery, right? Like, we don't need to do ever comment on every single thing they post, right? But every month, a couple months, whatever it is, right? Kind of do that touch point. And there's also some nice, again, in the templates, ways of emails that you can send as a follow up. I think one of the tips that I think is really helpful is, we don't when we're doing a follow up conversation, it's not about asking questions unless you're having a conversation in which questions make sense, right? If, like, they said, make sure you email me in a couple months and ask me about internships. Okay, then ask a question. But otherwise, just make it I hope you're having I saw this article. It reminded me of our conversation. I hope you're having a good day, right? There's no need for them to write back. Don't feel upset if they didn't write you back. But now you're in their mind, right? And they see you as, again, a fellow professional. And then just one other thing, is when you're closing the conversation, that I wanted to mention, is ask if there's anything you can do for them. Chances are no, right? But you never know. There could be a time that they're interested. They're doing a survey of college students to learn more about something, or, I mean, you never know, right? If there's any way that you might be helpful, and it puts that in their minds, right? That, again, to you, is this is a two-way street, that you're available to them as much as hopefully they are to you.
So that's going through that full process to make contact, to network, and help discover the path through that process. We do want to make sure you're aware. This is, early on in Humanities Fest, but moving forward throughout the next 2 weeks, there's plenty of events happening. And one of those events is on March 2nd, Wednesday at 9 a.m. There's going to be an alumni panel talking about what you can do with a background in the humanities. So this is a great opportunity to hear from professionals and then follow up and network and make contact with them. So to
I saw
register,
you at the workshop.
yep,
I really enjoyed what you said.
gives you a
Yes.
great way to personalize it. So make sure that you register for that event, that session happening on March 2nd, and check out rest of the Humanities Fest calendar.
Mm.
But that brings us to the end here. So make sure that you also reach out to us at the Career Services Center as it makes sense for you based off the different things that you're working on.
Yeah, and we'll definitely take any questions that you have. I know we're getting towards the end here, but and we can always meet with you one on one to help with this process too, right? So, if you're like, I'm struggling how to find organizations or how to reach out to people, again, we can always work with you as well. So if you go to our website, fill out the service request form, one of us will get back to you. Again, we're a free service for students, alumni, and community members, for anything that you need to be career ready. All right. Oh, thank you, Bob. Right. Thanks for sending your students to our presentation today. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for showing up. If there's no questions, I wanted to thank Rebecca and Pierre for taking their time and putting this together. Um, it's a great resource for everybody that was in the room today, and hopefully will be a kind of ongoing resource. We'll put the video up on our YouTube channel and send that out. So thank you again very much, and we're looking forward to the March 2nd presentation to hear from alumni.
well, thank you everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you very much.